Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening to Madam Sulaila and my fellow friends. I am Mohamad Fauzan FAKHRI bin Mohamad, and I will be doing informative speech today. Now, a war is raging in the world that has the potential to affect the entire world, namely Russia-Ukraine war. I chose to educate my audience that this issue is widespread and potentially dangerous if no action is taken. So let's get to the background of it. So what is war? War can be defined as the armed struggle between two or more countries or a party within the country. However, in this address, I will only focus on the Russia-Ukraine war. To begin with, the dispute between the Russia and the US, as well as the NATO allies, may be summarized by a concept in a political science known as security dilemma. When one party feels threatened by the enemy's security measures and both have the opposing viewpoints. So I'll explain on why this conflict started at first and its reasons. So before it, let me get some of my central idea. Why did the Russia-Ukraine war start? So before I continue, I will quote some said from a war veteran, Ernest Hemingway, in 1946. He said, and I quote, "Never think that war, no matter how necessary, nor how justified, is not a crime." So first, we got the pie chart one, which is a Europe countries that support Ukraine joining NATO. So we got the Hungary, Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovakia. And I'll explain on the next slide on what about this pie chart is. So reason number one, Ukraine apply to joining NATO. Pie chart one indicate that the nation that support Ukraine joining NATO and allow the Iron Curtain between the NATO and the Russia advance near the Russian border after the fall of the Soviet Union. So before the fall of the Soviet Union, the Iron Curtain is illustrated by the black line. If the NATO confirm Ukraine membership, it will have influence on Russia as the Iron Curtain set up by the NATO along the Russian border, as well as its troops will supervise securing the border if Ukraine joins. So if Ukraine succeeds joining the NATO, the new Iron Curtain will be set here, the new Iron Curtain right at the Russian border. So as of Ukraine tries to join NATO, it will endanger Russia as the alliance continue to develop without a constraint. This act, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin, cannot take place because of the danger it caused to the Russian people. So to counteract this, Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a special military operation against Ukraine. So people may label him insane, but his acts are exactly what others would do if the enemy intended to hurt us. So moving on to pie chart 2. So on the pie chart 2, we got the ethnic in Ukraine, and this is the map of the Ukraine. So we got the 60% of the Ukrainians are Ukrainians, 30% of the Ukraine is Russians, and the minorities are as in the Hungarians, Bulgarians, etc., etc., etc. And I will explain what this pie chart indicates on the next slide. So reason number 2, Russian ethnic in Ukraine. So pie chart 2 indicates that Russia officially recognized two eastern regions of Ukraine, namely Donetsk and Luhansk, because 30% of the Ukraine ethnic Russian live there. In Donetsk, formerly, although a third of the area is controlled by a pro-Russian group since the last 8 years, this allows Russia to send a lot of military aid entering the Ukrainian borders. On the February 24, the Russian president appeared on the television for almost 1 hour and announced a special military operation against Ukraine pursuant to Article 51 of Part 7 of the United Nations and approval of the Assembly of the Russian Federation. The purpose of the operation is to cripple the Ukrainian military forces and suppress the Nazi movement in Ukraine, as well as asking the opponent to lay down the next weapon to retreat. So according to the Russian president, political leaders from the West continues to pose a threat with the advance of NATO, even though Russia has been trying for almost 30 years to reach an agreement with several major countries in NATO on securing issues in Europe, and the request of the Russian side only seen as a cynical or considered a threat. Putin also reiterated that the red line of war he mentioned several times have been skipped, and that Russia needs to defend its people who had been oppressed for 8 years in Donetsk and Luhansk. Putin also stated that the military operation was not to restore peace and asserted that the outsiders who were interfering in Russian action will receive a bad impression that has never happened in the history, and the Russians were ready for any action from the enemy. So we'll come to the conclusion. Finally, whatever the reason for the country leaders to go to war, the common people, including the children and the elderly, who are unable to defend themselves, bear the brunt of the misery. However, once this conflict is over, the world security situation will change, with some of the European countries, such as Germany, increasing its military budget to 2% of annual gross domestic product, and the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has proposed cooperation with the US, including the deployment of US nuclear weapons in Japan. So I'll provide some recommendations. There are several ways to prevent war, one of which is for both parties to reach out and learn about the other's values, both personal and cultural. When two adversaries have no prior knowledge of one another, the fog of war will descend and lead them to war. As a result, we have a war based on assumption and prejudice. Mutual acceptance is the goal. We all want the same thing at the deepest level. Second, show respect to the opposing party. Otherwise, you lose before you even begin. Finally, before the war begins, we must reconsider a life that will cause, whether it is a child or a husband. If both parties can reach an agreement, any problem can be solved. And I will provide you, and that's all for my presentation. Thank you for listening. That is all from me. Thank you.